theme for Social Work Month. The theme for Social Work Month is the time is right for social work. And we're so excited about our first virtual panel. They will be talking about social work and juvenile justice, and you'll hear more about it. So again, thank you for joining our first social work virtual presentation. And to get us started, we want everyone right now, this is a call to action. If you have your paper and pen near you, if you can take this hashtag and write it down, because if you use tweet, we want you to tweet. We want you to tweet facts about YSI. We want you to tweet facts about things that you may have said and you want to share with others. So this is a call to action. If you can take out your pen, pencil, anything that you write with a crayon.
You get your
we want you to write capital A.
And you're doing whatever their reading lesson is at that.
Capital L, capital J, capital JONUS. So please use that hashtag to write down important facts that you may have heard about the conversation today. And so we will get started with our presentation and it's just going to be a great presentation. And we hope that you learn a lot today. And again, happy Social Work Month. The time is right for social work and the time is right for you. So thank you again for joining, and I will pass the virtual mic over to Dr. Avni Shah.
Hello all. I'm so excited that you have been able to join us today on Conversations on Juvenile Justice. And we welcome you, especially because many of you all may not know that the Youth Service Institute is part of the School of Social Work, and this is very uncommon. This is a follow-up to our Ethel Hall colloquium addressing prison sentencing and criminal justice reform, and how we are a model example in our state for the juvenile justice initiative and how we're doing a great job. We can always do more, but this is an opportunity for you to see what social workers in the juvenile justice system are doing, and to really see how this came about. So many years ago in 1990, one of our faculty members at the School of Social Work, who was well connected with the Department of Youth Services, actually, and his name is Dr. Summerall, I took classes with him, and he was this amazing person who was passionate about issues with juveniles going to correctional facilities, and he wanted something more. He wanted treatment options. He wanted actual options to be rehabilitative. And in conjunction with the Department of Youth Services, he began as a consultant initially, and then housed facilities. There's like the accountability-based sex offender program, which I remember him putting together as a student. And I began working in the correctional system to help young ladies who had experienced all sorts of challenging experiences. From that, he worked on the Chalkville assessment program. And there is a ABSOP continuum of care program, accountability based. There's working on womanhood program, which is a stone's throw from our campus. It used to be actually on campus, and they moved. And this program helps young women who have emotional concerns, address those in a very holistic environment. And so there have been a lot of amazing things that have taken place through the work of the School of Social Work, through the work of this one faculty member, and over time, the work of many, many amazing people at YSI, including the director. But if you want to read more about it, I have a lot about this here, but there's information about the WOW program that you can learn a little bit more about as well. And all the different programs that are housed underneath the umbrella of Youth Service Institute. And with that, I'm going to do a quick stop share. And I want to just be grateful to all of the individuals who are working in the juvenile justice system, all social workers. We often think of, other individuals providing services in the juvenile justice program, but many social workers are doing a lot of work to prevent youth from re-entering and recidivating, or, to really improve their quality of life when they, to have a better options in life. So I'm in gratitude of our presenters and all the work they do in the trenches. And one of my colleagues who spent over 20 years of her life dedicating to the mission of work with individuals in the juvenile justice system. And this is Jennifer Panerson, who was a past WOW clinical director, but she gave her life in the cause of juvenile justice. And so I felt it appropriate to just recognize her work, but there are countless others that have done the same thing and have sacrificed their lives in benefiting individuals. And now I would love to hand it over to my co-chair of the Diversity Committee, Leah Cheatham, to discuss the rest of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Avni. I am Leah Cheatham. I'm a faculty member here at the School of Social Work and also a co-chair of our School of Social Work Diversity Committee. And it is my absolute pleasure today to introduce our moderator, one of our former students here at the University of Alabama, who's now a professor elsewhere in the state. We have Dr. Taylor Ellis with us here today. Dr. Ellis is an assistant professor of social work at Jacksonville State University. He obtained his Master of Social Work and PhD in Social Work from the University of Alabama and a bachelor's degree in Human Services from Kennesaw State University. Outside of education, Dr. Ellis's primary role in social work practice has been as a program evaluator. Currently, he partners with Embrace Alabama Kids to provide independent consultation on the evaluation of the Higher Education Scholarship Program. And of particular note to today's session, he previously served as the Youth Services Institute's lead evaluator for the evaluation of the Accountability-Based Sex Offender Program Continuum of Care, or ABSOP COC, and also the Multidisciplinary Abuse Prevention Services Program funded through the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. In addition to all of these accomplishments and roles that Dr. Ellis takes on, he is also a poet, a partner, a parent, and a member of the Social Work and the Arts Roundtable. And with that, I'd love to turn it over to you, Dr. Ellis, to facilitate today's conversation with our excellent panelists who are kind enough to join us today. Thank you so much, Dr. Ellis.
Thank you. I really appreciate you reaching out and allowing me to be a part of this conversation. YSI is very near and dear to my heart and really set a foundation for my work as a professional, and really has guided me through all of everything that I've done post-education and through my education. So I really appreciate this time and being included in this conversation. Today, our panelists are Latoria Horton and Monica Rowland. Latoria serves as a service monitor at the Alabama Department of Youth Services in the Community Service Division. Prior to her work with DYS, she served the Jefferson County area through her work as a social service worker with the Department of Human Resources. While in that role, she investigated abuse and neglect cases, conducted crisis intervention, organized clinical treatments for families and children, created court reports, and testified in court to advocate for her clients. She is gifted in creating relationships, establishing rapport with her client families, and in guiding others towards success. Her passion for criminal justice, juvenile justice, and social work was sparked through her work as a legal assistant specializing in criminal and juvenile justice court cases, as well as her exposure to many of the challenges that the clients faced. Her passion to meet clients where they are and speak up when there is injustice in the systematic structures pushed her to pursue a career that overlaps criminal justice with social work to create real change for those around her. Latoria earned her BS in criminal justice from Jacksonville State University, way to go, in 2013, and her MSW from Alabama A&M University in 2018. Monica is the Proposal Development Administrator at the Youth Services Institute. She joined the team at YSI in 2020 after years of working in consulting roles with the Department of Youth Services Community Service Division. Through her consulting roles with DYS, she has worked closely in multiple private provider programs who provide services to adjudicated youth across the state. She has provided oversight regarding service provision in programs, advocacy for juveniles, and oversight of clinical and Medicaid services provided in the program. Obtaining her BSW from the University of Montevallo in 1999 and her MSW from Rutgers in 2000, she has spent much of her professional career working with children in difficult situations, either in the juvenile justice arena or therapeutic foster care arena, but has also worked in cultural engineering and leadership development within organizations across the Southeast and consulted with thriving continuing education company in the Atlanta area. In her current role, she provides technical assistance to the DYS Community Service Division through administration of their JSCO provider certification program, administration of community services RFP and grant projects, application processes, and assists with the oversight of 50 plus diversion programs within the state of Alabama that receive funding through DYS. In addition to her technical assistance responsibilities, she also provides event planning and organization services to YSI, assists with organizing and implementing the PSB work group, PSB task force, and other similar tasks within YSI area expertise. So now what we're going to do, actually what I'll say is thank you all so much for being here and giving us your time. I'm very excited myself to hear the answer to some of these questions and things like that. So we've got some questions that we're going to work through. If you all have questions for our presenters, I encourage you to put them all in the chat or hold on to them, take a little note. At the end of the session, we're going to have a Q&A time. But what we're going to do, what I want to hear about a little bit more is just what you currently do. I did give that overview, but if there's anything you want to specifically highlight or add to what you're currently doing with the Department of Juvenile Justice and Youth Services.
So you did mention most of what I do, and going through my bio, and that seems to cover most of it. I will say that the common thread among the roles that I serve is really in creating programs in the community that can help these children. If you guys remember from the event we had last month, so many of the issues that came up were a result of not really doing work in the community and really institutionalizing folks fairly quickly. And so that's kind of the history of where we've come from. And so the common thread in both of the things that I do, or well, most of the things that I do, is creating those programs in the community that can help our clients to avoid being institutionalized. So and just really learning how successful that can be. Latoria, anything else?
I guess in my role, I would say I work very closely with many of our private providers across the state. And with working with them, I am working closely with making sure that we are working with the service plans and we are meeting various such as maybe Medicaid guidelines and the DYS guidelines, and just making sure that we are providing the services that our juveniles need to be successful upon returning home.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really, both of those statements are really at the heart of YSI, but being in that community and helping those other organizations really provide those services for these youth. I think that's excellent. We've had somebody bring up in the chat that they like the shirt. We were talking about that before the meeting. If you all would please tell us what your shirts say and maybe tell us why you chose to wear those today.
So mine says all behavior is a form of communication, because that is one of the things that I'm really passionate about, and making sure that we understand that every single thing that our kids do or juveniles do, whether it's, behaviors that they do in school and all the way up to, in the event that they get involved in criminal behavior or, even the behavior that they exhibit when they're in these programs, it's all a form of communication. So
Yes.
that is always our challenge, is to figure out what they're trying to communicate. So.
And my shirt says, education is activism and knowledge is power. I chose this shirt because education is the foundation of everything. Once you implement the education of every component, I truly believe that we can move forward in many barriers that are faced with the juvenile justice system and along with their support team.
Excellent. Excellent. Love that. So maybe kind of walk us through what a day looks like in the agency with what you're doing. What might a typical day look like for you?
I'm gonna just go ahead and tell you, there's really no typical day. Of course, you always go in with an agenda, but the main priority is to make sure that there's an urgent matter, that we handle that urgent matter at that time. But there's no set day that looks the same.
So how has that, is that something you enjoy? Is that something that keeps it kind of like the uncertainty of it, the not really knowing? How do you manage with that?
Well, I manage basically.
Yeah.
I have a to-do list, and I start out with my to-do list and normally be maybe 1 to 10, maybe even 1 to 20. And
Yep.
From there, I prioritize what is most important for that day. And however, if a crisis comes up, of course, I'm going to make sure that I handle that crisis at that time.
Absolutely.
I'm just gonna add on, that's exactly what it is because you never know what every day is going to be different, and we never know exactly what we're walking into when we're walking into these programs. We may have a general idea, but we never know exactly, or issues that are going to, pop up throughout the course of the day. So we're constantly juggling which ball's on fire the most, and
Yep.
that's the one we address at that moment. So yeah, you can in this position you can never get everything on your to-do list done, so you just have to be okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that ongoing list. So let's talk specifically about social justice issues and within this population. And so I'm curious what social justice issues you see in your work with the population and programs that you work with.
So many. I feel like one of the biggest ones that we see is mental health. And then, there's also some family violence. We see some of the residual effects of family violence. And then also, I know I've seen several girls over the course of the work that I've done who have been involved in some human trafficking. And so that is often something that we see as well. And then I know you have a few that you see pretty frequently.
I would say I see the drug use on the rise and the racial injustice, to add to what Monica shared.
Yeah, and a big one is really kind of the family dynamics that happen as a result of the mass incarceration that we talked about last month, and what happened in the 90s, and kind of how that trickles down to these families and their kids. We really see those families were disrupted generations ago, and how that continues to trickle down even now with so many of our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big, I love that kind of just, with each of the answers that you gave, you all really kind of encompass that holistic view that we bring into social work, right? Talking about the individual with the family or the mental health, and also talking about that broader family systems, with the individual, talking about the racial injustice and how that's become systematically part of our programs and the way that we serve individuals. We have to take all of those things into consideration when we're providing services and when we're going into situations. How do you all address those issues in your work?
That's the challenge, right? Well, there's lots of different things that we do. Some of those, include advocacy and really trying to recognize what some of those challenges are and advocate for our clients, both for them while they're in whatever program it is that they're in. But sometimes we're also advocating with, their JPOs and their court personnel who are working with them and advocating with them, sometimes within their family units. So lots and lots of advocacy. Then there's also, really exploring the communication patterns and how some of those communication patterns that are set up in their families and trying to plant the seeds for change for them.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing too, to help. That sort of goes along with what Latoria was saying in regard to education. There's a big thing that we really want to do is, diversion programs and community diversion programs, and how can we implement those across the state and continue to support those so that we can keep our kids from becoming institutionalized.
For the people in the group, will you give a brief explanation of diversion programs, just so we know we're working on the same definition and everything?
Sure, absolutely. The diversion programs that exist in Alabama, they were created in 2008 for some funding from the Department of Youth Services. And the way that happened was there was an entire statewide education and shift that I was not a part of. That all happened before I came on board. But I'm lucky enough to get to work around this folks who were part of that creation. And they really started to recognize that a lot of the children across the state and juveniles across the state were being institutionalized and essentially sent off. You may have heard that with the kids you work with. So they're being sent off and they're, maybe getting some treatment. Sometimes they were getting great treatment, sometimes they weren't, but nothing was really changing in their community or in their home. And so what would happen is they would go back home and they would do the same thing because nothing had changed in their environment. So anyway, we created these diversion programs that exist within the communities, and every county or community who has a diversion program is able to have input into what that looks like for them, because you guys know that Jefferson County is going to be different than, Mobile County. They're just different. They have different issues and different problems. And so each county was able to have some input into what their diversion program looked like. And those programs are currently in operation, and we are always trying to minimize the numbers of kids that are in institutional programs and increase the numbers that are in diversion programs so that they hit the diversion program and get referred there where they can have that wraparound service before they ever get to the institution, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, and that's a huge adjustment. So, right, so we're trying to remove kids from going to those secure facilities, potentially, right? We know that unfortunately entering into those secure facilities is a great predictor for recidivism. And so, right, if we can integrate them, help them stay in the community when we can, when it's possible, we have a more likelihood for long-term success for them. I love that. But I want to go back to Toria, if you could, I just want to bring that question back to you of how you mentioned, there was one more, I wish I could remember, you mentioned racial injustice, and there was one more that you mentioned, but just talking about how you kind of address those within your work and what you're doing.
When it comes down to the racial injustice, of course, we are all aware it happens. And it's based on mostly county by county. So that is something that we're definitely wanting to push. That, of course, each juvenile is individualized, and let's make sure we're treating them as they are individualized. And I would also like to piggyback on the education. I'm big on the education barriers. I think in the school systems, a lot of times, I get it's been a lot going on here lately, but just if we can find a way to not promote the students to the next grade if they have not met that educational level, because it comes a time when they become the problematic child, or they're stated as the problematic child, Then once they reach of age of 16, hey, they're ready to drop out. And once they drop out, they don't have any skills to, find a decent job or make a decent living. So then that becomes the issue when they become in the criminal justice system. And another one I would like to expand on is breaking generational curses. We have families that dad's been in jail, grandmother's been in jail. Now we're facing the juvenile being in the juvenile justice system, and just finding a way to educate the families on generational curses. Because I remember one time as I was working in Jefferson County, it was a family. Mom didn't take education serious because her mom didn't take education serious. So if her mom didn't take education serious, she didn't take education serious, how could she take education serious for her children? So with that being, that's an example of let's break that generational curse. With breaking that generational curse, hopefully we can reduce the juveniles into our juvenile system.
Absolutely. The individual education as well as how we educate the community is so vital. One of our attendees was giving an example of how we like some of the issues that they've seen. And honestly, how I would summarize it, it's a longer comment, but just the stigma that's associated with these individuals and having to overcome those stigmas through education, both of what they perceive about themselves and again, how we educate the other systems and programs that they're interacting with. So it's extremely important to address that. And then that kind of ties in on that. What topics, skills, or trainings do you think are essential in working with juveniles in the correctional system?
I was about to jump on one of your comments that you made about education.
Oh, please do. Please, hey, take it and run with it.
Sorry, my brain was going there.
No, go ahead.
Asking that question. So what I was going to say is just kind of piggyback on what you were saying in regard to education. So it is about educating the family, and it is about educating our clients. But so often in what we do in our roles, it's about educating the attorneys who have been working with them. Yes. And it's educating their JPOs who, certainly, they just come from a different background. And so what they bring to the table is extremely valuable, but it's very, very different than what a social worker brings. And so we really have to work with not only our student or our client and our families, but also with all the other people who are around them. And even their teachers and all of those type things, because they don't just their background is different, and they don't think of things necessarily the way that we as a social worker may think of things. So anyway, that's where my brain was going when you were asking that question, Taylor. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's excellent. I really do. You're adding to that. I really do. And please, if at any point, like this is, we want to hear from you all. We want to hear what's coming up as we're asking these questions or having these conversations. So anything like that is more than welcomed. So we're here to hear from y'all. So to tie it back though, what topics, skills, trainings do you think are essential working with juveniles in the correctional system? And you can tie this back to if you want to bring in specific social work skills, or really any outside influence as well.
So there's a couple. Of course, me being a social worker, I'm a little bit partial to some of the education that social workers may get. And some of those things that I remember from all those years ago when I was in school, and I know LaToria and I have talked about these things, are things like really understanding the person in their environment, person and environment theory, and that's how you can really create some change for them. Really understanding, trauma systems and what that looks like and what trauma exposure does, not just to the client, but to all of the people around them. And then how trauma, like say mom has been traumatized, how she passes that to her children without Absolutely. Even realizing or being conscious of the fact that she does that. So, those things are very important to me. And, I often tell the programs that I go out and visit that, some of the trauma information on trauma, some of those should be required reading for anybody who works with our kids, because there's just so much information there. So those are some big topics for me. I know there's a few others that Latoya and I have talked about. If you want to pick up there.
One of my biggest is the family-based intervention. A lot of times we have the juveniles with us and we're meeting them where they're at. They have identified their areas. JPO has provided input. Their support team has provided input. But however, as we're working with them, they're still going back home to that same environment. Yeah. So implementing some services for their support team or the environment that they're returning back to. So with that being said, okay, we can start working at it together. And it goes back to the diversion programs. Our diversion programs work with families. They work individualized with the juveniles. So just as we're working with the juveniles, let's work with their support team. So when they come home, instead of them returning back home and they have the tools and they're trying to implement the tools, but hey, their support team may not even understand what's the purpose behind the tools.
Yes.
And another component I would say is, let's get away from the stigma of counseling. If you attend counseling, something's wrong. Mm-hmm. Hey, it goes back to the trauma part. Hey, some of us have endured trauma and didn't realize it was trauma because it was okay back then. But now it is perfectly okay to seek counseling. It is just perfectly okay. So those are my two those are my two go-getters along with what Monica said.
And I had some other ideas while she was talking. And so some other things that I think are really important for folks who are working with this population is really understanding what motivational interviewing is and what that's like and how that works and how you can utilize that to move your clients forward. And then also, some of it is not necessarily about information that they necessarily need to get before they start working with these children, but some of it is really about their attitude while they're working with these children. So for example, one of my things, I worked with a guy years ago, and he used to say to me, I don't have to know everything, but what I do have to do is know somebody who knows that. Yes. And if I can know somebody who knows that, then I can connect them and I can really leverage those relationships that I've created to achieve what I'm trying to achieve for my client. And so, he used to say all the time, leverage everything. And that seems kind of goofy, but that is stuck in my head and it just replays constantly when I'm working with my kids, is to leverage everything that's available to me to try to create the change or plant the seeds. Even if I can't necessarily create the change, maybe I can plant the seeds so that they can later create that change. And then the other thing that's a really big deal is be aware that you don't know everything. We can't know everything. And it's okay if we don't know everything. Some people get really, some professionals I've encountered working with some of these populations, they get real defensive if they don't feel like they know the right answer, or if they do have to turn to somebody else to ask for help. And that's just not true. So anyway, that's the soapbox. I'm gonna step down.
No. This is your soapbox. This is your time. It's okay. But those are fantastic. I love that. I mean, bringing in the ideas of trauma and the destigmatizing, asking for help, both from that individual, right, seeking out counseling, but also from ourselves, knowing our limitations and acknowledging that. It goes back to our core value of competence, right? As social workers, that's so important that we adhere to that. And that self-awareness. And the phrase that I tell my students all the time, we're brokers of resources. Just like you said, we don't have to be able to provide that service. We do this thing and that's okay. We just got to know where to direct our clients to so that they can get the help that they need. So I love that. Let's dive into this more a little bit. You can make connections to trauma because I think there's a big relationship here, but I do want you all to specifically talk about the mental health issues that these youth experience and maybe how you address those and work with them.
So in regards to mental health, some of the things that we see a lot of with our kids that we work with, and even the parents, is anxiety, lots of anxiety, depression, lots of depression, but they don't always know that's what it is. In fact, they'll tell you it's not that.
Yep.
But we know that it is if you sit back and you look at what those symptoms of depression are, and if you talk through some of those things with them, that's exactly what it is. And then there's also some things around, really, it's not technically a diagnosable mental health issue, but self-esteem is huge. And excuse me, how some of that trauma connects back to self-esteem, that trauma exposure, or even some of the education stuff Latoya was talking about earlier, where they get passed in school because I'm so sorry, I've been talking too much. So they get passed in school, but then they get pushed to the next grade, but then they're not on to the next grade, but now they're the dumb kid, right? And of course, we as adults don't want to say they're the dumb kid because that's not right. But, all the other kids are calling them the dumb kid. Yeah. And so, then how do we address that? Well, now we're dealing with self-esteem issue for this kid because we've set him up to fail. And that happens a lot, both in school, but I think that happens a lot with our juvenile justice kids too, because we don't understand why they can't make the changes they need to make. And so, we don't tell them we're dumb, but we'll say, I can't believe you can't make the right decisions, Right. And so we just kind of rub all that stuff in, that they feel bad about already. And we keep bringing it up, and, and we keep bringing it up like their worst day, and we keep talking about it. And wouldn't it be terrible if we were all remembered by our very worst day? So yeah, I mean, those are some of the big issues I see. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yes, definitely. I remember hearing, this kid you're too young to be depressed. You're too young to have anxiety. As we know, the world is changing. When I was coming up, I knew nothing about social media. I don't even know if we even had social media.
I don't think we did.
Some of the things that the juveniles are facing now, we didn't have to face it. So let's get out of that of saying they're too young for anxiety, they're too young for depression. Let's call in parents. Let's try to educate them on the signs to see and the symptoms to see, and try to be a little more proactive. And hey, if things are not working out there, it's okay to go to a counselor. It's okay to go to their primary doctor and get a referral. And another thing that I would like to expand on is that low self-esteem.
Yes.
When we're able to recognize that, hey, this student is not maybe motor skills or not at the average age of what they should be, it's okay to start recognizing. It's okay to start speaking up on it. It's okay to start being more proactive instead of being reactive.
Yes.
I think it's very important that, all mine will always tie back into the education of the parents. I mean, I'm just really, really big on the education on the parents. And let's remember confidentiality as well. Sometimes we get the talking, and we know as a student is passed down from grade to grade, teacher's going to communicate. I mean, the neighborhood is going to communicate. That happens. But in the meantime, let's remember that confidentiality, because it may be somebody else's child today, but it can be ours same day or tomorrow, or not even if it's not our child, it can be a relative. So those are key components that I really feel that we should really pay a little bit more closer attention to.
I completely agree. And what I want to highlight there too is when we talk about confidentiality and ethical practices, those are expected to be upheld with our colleagues as well, right? And so how we talk about our clients to our colleagues and things like that, we have to take into consideration, because as you just said, they may not be our client today, but they might be tomorrow. And so if we carry in those negative expectations, that's going to influence how we serve them. So we just got to be aware of those things. I'm so glad that you brought that up. So we're after this, we're going to move into our Q&A section, but I want to make sure we've got enough time for that. So what I want to do right now, the big question, right? If you all could give us one thing that you see that we could do to positively impact the juvenile justice system, what would it be?
If we have we're going to try to narrow it down to one. I have one, and that is that I really think we've talked about education a lot. You guys, education is so important, and not just, in all of the official ways. Education is important because we want you guys to keep talking about this. We want you to talk to your friends. We want you to talk to your parents. We want you to talk to your coworkers. Talk to them about what this looks like and what some of the challenges are that we're seeing. I know one thing that I'm sorry, I'm supposed to only say one, but I really have three, okay? Another one is that we've talked about is, really understanding, being conscious of our mindset, and that it's not mine mindset. And really making sure that we, like LaToria was saying, it may not be you this time, it might be you the next time. And so really kind of checking yourself in regard to that when you start thinking, well, that doesn't really affect me, so I'm not really going to worry about it. And finally, one of the things that I would love for you guys to do is continue the conversation. I know Sharon talked about the retweeting and our hashtag that we have, that we would love for you guys to use. And we've been talking about a lot of different things. I know there have been some people in the chat who have quoted some of the things we've said. And so what I would love for you guys to do is take some of the quotes or some of the things that we're sending out through the UA School of Social Work today, retweet those things so that your group can, your contacts can see some of those things, but also talk about something you learned and use the hashtag. If it's not something that we actually are going to go ahead and tweet out, tell us what you learned with that hashtag so that we can keep that conversation going. Because that's really what it's all about, is making sure that everybody around us knows that this is real stuff, but we can make a really big difference. So.
You want to add anything you want to add to that?
I think my only thing I would like to say, as our profession, especially social workers, let's still be mindful of, we're human, but let's get away from that judgmental mindset. From time to time, we may be biased on our end and not even realize it, but it's okay to pull your coworker or your cohort to the side and say, hey, you may not realize this may be an ism and you're not, sometimes you don't realize it, but to make a long story short, let's get away from that judgmental mentality and realize what is our why and why are we working our why.
Excellent. I love that.
I think that sums it up for us. I know we're so passionate, literally we can go on and on, but we understand. We're good now.
Yeah, no, those are excellent. Seriously, I love that because it brings us back, right, to remember that these are kids, right? When we take that person in environment and when we start looking at the trauma or the mental health or the community, the need for resources, all of those things, it's good to focus on that. We got to address it. But at the end of the day, these are kids. And that's where, if we start there, then we can work through those things like efficiently and ethically. And you're absolutely right. We do. Like I said, we have that responsibility to our colleagues to step in and do it in a respectful way, but to be responsible to one another, ultimately so that the clients get the best services. That's the goal, right? Like it's not to just call people out. It's for the benefit of the client. And so we do it in a respectful way to be like, hey, just pull them aside, kind of thing. So it's really important. I love all of those things that y'all included. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open it up for some Q&A. I got to drag back to the top a little bit. We've had some great feedback and comments in here.
Taylor, if you would check your inbox, I send you 3 questions.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. It is loading. All right. So the first one we have, do all diversion programs accept adolescents returning to their home counties from institutional settings to provide services to assist with reintegration and transition?
So the short answer is no. However, I will say that the large majority of them do. Okay. So there are a few. We have a total of 51 diversion programs across the state through DYS. And then we also have some other programs. There's 7 of them across the state that are funded through a combination of DYS, DHR, and BMH money. And they're called Our Kids because they encompass several of those different areas. So altogether, there's close to 60. And so some of those programs have specific clients that they work with that will, they won't take them once they've been institutionalized, but the large majority of them do. And in fact, at DYS, we actually encourage them to have that follow-up once they get back to their home county. We try to have them have it at the front, and then if they do end up being institutionalized, then we turn around and ask them to have it at the end as well.
Excellent. So we have a comment that says, I am a school social worker with Bessemer City Schools. I would love to know about the juvenile diversion programs in our area.
Okay. You know what? I am happy to tell you that there are 3 in your area in Jefferson County. Actually, that's not true. Because there's also some of the Our Kids programs there in Jefferson County as well. So there are several. If you're curious about, and I could go on and on about this, and I feel like I'm getting tested because I have to know which of the almost 60 apply to which particular county. So if there's something you're interested in about your specific county, I'm going to ask you to email me, and I'm happy to tell you which ones apply to your county and which ones are available there. But I can tell you that in Jefferson County, there's actually, I think there's 3 or 4 that are just DYS, and that there's 3 that are just DYS, and then there's a couple that are Our Kids funded. So.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. So we'll like we said, hey, right, we're brokers of resources. We're getting them connected, right? That's what we do for each other. Excellent. So the next question, do you guys use the Parent Project program to help with the juveniles and their parents?
Yes. There are a lot of our diversion programs across the state that use that curriculum with Parent Project, and then they also have a simultaneous group for their clients. So Parent Project works with parents, and then the other program works with just the kids. I can't tell you exactly how many off the top of my head, but I can tell you, if you remember when I first started talking about diversion programs, now each county is allowed to participate in kind of the creation of their diversion program and what they want. So those who found that useful and wanted that, use that. And there are a large handful of ours who across the state who utilize that curriculum.
Great. So Latoria, we got one, someone loved your comment about knowing your why, and they have specifically asked, what is your why?
Okay, I can elaborate on that. So, but my why is no one is exempt. It could have been me, it could have been other family members, personal reasons. I could have been largely one of the young ladies that's in the program. So my why is reaching the juvenile before they transition over to the adult system. So it's understanding the why of why am I here to help? What can I do to assist? And what can I do with meeting the juvenile where they're at? So that's just my why of understanding my role in that juvenile's life, because my role will be different in everybody's life that I come across. So just maintaining and understanding my why.
Absolutely. Monica, do you want to, I would love to hear your answer in response to this as well.
Mine's probably going to be very simple because we were actually watched the program last month. We both had a conversation after that and said, oh my gosh, that could have been me. So, that is it. And I truly believe that we are all 1 or 2 decisions away from, being just like the clients we serve and just in their exact scenario. So, anything we can do to remember that, none of us are above it. So
yeah, absolutely right. It's empathy, right? It's putting ourselves in our client's shoes and seeing the similarities that are there and going, oh my goodness, right? Like 1 or 2 decisions away. Absolutely. All right. I think, let's see. I just want to make sure because I'm going to be conscious of time. Okay, great. So I think will this be last question or do we?
We have room for a couple more questions.
Okay, fantastic. All right. So this next question, what are your thoughts on psychiatric residential treatment facilities?
I'm gonna be a little limited on it. I think they're very resourceful.
yeah.
Long as you have the staff, the trained staff from administration down to the direct care staff
Mm,
and the therapist that understands the population that they work with, I think
yes.
it's great and it's needed.
Yeah.
So that's simple.
Yes, and I will agree with everything she's saying. Oftentimes what we see is that things don't, they start great and then they don't trickle down to the people who are on the front lines. And so we need to make sure that that's going all the way down. And I think that they're there for a reason, just like, we've heard us talk about diversion programs versus institutionalization or institutional programs. And, the reality is we need institutional programs.
Yeah.
We need them, they have to be there, just like psychiatric residential placements need to be there. There is a population that we have to have those for. But if we can minimize their use as much as possible, then the ones who truly need it can really get the services they need.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, we don't block up the system.
yes.
Yeah, right. So we've started to kind of shift our language within the field of social work away from the idea of cultural competence towards cultural humility, and that depending on the that's racial competence, that's setting, right? Knowing your setting, knowing the education that you need to provide these services, but coming from a place of humility to understand that there's always room for education and growth is really important. So we got a fun question. People want to know where you got your shirts.
Well,
Got it from her.
actually, a good friend of mine, she actually made shirt. I shared with her what I had the speaking engagement, and she asked me how many shirts she needed. She said 2, and she told me to come pick them up. But if anybody wants to know, I'll be glad to give them that information.
Yeah, absolutely. We do. We got a couple of people in here that they're very interested in. Do we have any other questions from the group that we'd like to open up here?
Actually, I would like to brag for a few minutes.
Yeah.
In regard to some of those diversion programs that we talked about, and reducing the numbers of institutionalized kids and increasing the numbers of kids we're reaching in their communities. So I was looking up some numbers in preparation for this conversation today, and I was a little floored with some of the things that I found. So I'm gonna take you way back, okay, to 2005. All right. In 2005, we had 3,356 juveniles in Alabama who were committed to DYS. Okay. So let that sink in for a minute. I'm sorry, that was 2006. In 2007 is around the same, 3,252. Okay. So we started diversion programs back in 2008, and they have slowly grown to encompass 66 of the 67 counties in the state. We've got one lone holdout. But most of our counties have access to diversion for their kids. And in pre-COVID years, everything's crazy since COVID. Courts have shut down, and so the numbers aren't quite normal. But pre-COVID, if I go back to 2018, the number was 1,084. Okay. In 2019, it was 1,068. If we're looking at COVID numbers in 2020, 720. That is amazing. Okay. Yeah, that's amazing. So that's a huge difference from 3,356. So we're moving in the right direction, you guys.
Absolutely.
We just really have to stay the course and keep that education happening, and keep intervening in communities and creating opportunities for these kids to understand that where they are is not where they always have to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm done bragging.
No, that's a great thing to brag about. That's something we definitely need to be proud of. And I'm very glad that the School of Social Work at the University of Alabama has been able to play a part in that by providing those diversion services to the community. And I'm very thankful to have been a part of that program and worked there for so long. And so are there any, we got one last question that just came in. It says, are there any ways we can directly advocate for more diversion programs in our counties if it is needed?
With people what I can. You know, my thing is always connecting people. That's one of my favorite things of the job, is seeing the difference that I can make, and connecting people so that they can eventually create a difference. So if that's something you're interested in, shoot me an email. I'm happy to help. Excellent.
Excellent. We've put both of their emails in the chat already, so you might have to scroll up a little bit, but they are in there. So this has been an excellent conversation, and I'll say thank you so much for both of your time and your answers. I know that with everything that y'all are doing, the programs that you're involved in, it's a lot to sometimes take this time out, but it's so important. And it's been so beneficial for me, and I know it has been for everyone else attending as well. So thank you all so much. We really appreciate this.
I would like to say thank you to my sisters of the Alpha Kappa Sorority Incorporated, and to everyone else as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Monica and Latoya. Thank you, Taylor. It could not have been possible without you all. So thank you so much. Thanks also to the Executive Director of YSI, Dr. Jill Beck. Dr. Beck, would you like to say a couple words before we turn it over to Peggy Swales, Trosper?
I just would like to thank everybody for the opportunity. I think you saw in my comments, I'm so proud of our current YSI folks, Monica, and obviously our former YSI folk, Taylor, and then Latoya Horton, who we work with all the time as the service monitor for our WOW program. I just couldn't be more proud of them and the work they're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, thanks to all the attendees. So stay tuned. I will turn it over to my colleague, Ms. Trosper, so she can talk about how you can obtain your CEU for today. Again, thank you for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. And again, happy Social Work Month. Peggy, I turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks again, everybody. Today's program does qualify for 1 contact hour of a CEU. So watch your email if you registered. That will be sent out to your email, and then hopefully this afternoon or tomorrow that should be out. I'm also been capturing the resources shared in the chat box that we will disseminate in that email as well. We do welcome you, as Sharon Wilkes mentioned. We're off next week for spring break, but we'll be back in 2 weeks where we will talk about social workers and in sports. So March Madness, social workers in sports, that's March 23rd. So please watch our social media on how you can register for that coming soon. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great afternoon.